This is, sorry about the light that's shining on my face. This is the second part of whatever I'm going to call these videos I'm filming today. Sorry, I had to stop the recording. I got a phone call from my psychologist and I wanted to answer it and talk with them, and I'm happy that I did. It's very, well, in many ways, very insightful talk. But let me try and get back on the topic that I was going on about here. And if you haven't watched the first part of this, do that. This isn't going to make any sense otherwise. I really mean that. It's not. So, going back on about how all my philosophies, anti-promo declaratism, not making promises, mercifalitism was basically the belief that you don't believe that any living thing deserves to die, but if you have to kill something or something has to be killed in order for something else to be preserved or something that's more beneficial to be saved, like this mainly applies to humans, but I apply it as well to animals and plant life, really. That you would act in a way to protect said thing or help to protect said thing. And you have no emotional gratification to the killing or the destruction of the thing that's causing it detriment. At least like to the person, mainly in terms of people or an animal life that's causing the other more beneficial one and innocent, I guess, and not harmful creature in that moment. You don't have any emotional satisfaction from taking the life of someone else, basically. And also that, again, you don't believe anyone deserves to die, but if you have to act in a way that would cause someone death for the good of something else, you would. Not even so much like someone once told me it's more of a utilitarian view of death. I don't really identify with utilitarianism in certain regards, like the whole greatest good for the greatest number, which in elements, yes, I do. Like I've said about self-maintaining altruism and stuff, and the whole you before I in many regards of my stances. But when it comes to that, like, it's not a utilitarian view in the sense I don't think that situation only applies to the whole you before I scenario. It can apply to yourself really as well. But so anyway, that's mercifalitism. The opposite of that, where you either like, oh yeah, no, someone does deserve to die, and you do have an emotional like gratification from their death, would be fatalitism, I guess I'll call it for now. Financial unfulfillmentism is basically what I just talked about in a bit of a rant, the last section of this, how basically it's the philosophy that money or a constructed form of currency in a system of economics is worthless, but it's not useless. Like, I don't believe, basically it's a belief that money doesn't have any like inherent worth, like, but it does have a use. It has a use in a society, in like a an economic system of a society and for trade negotiation. It does have a use. And again, people will say, well, hasn't that already been like thought of? Well, yeah, I said that all these things I'm naming already exist. It's just that they didn't seem to have names to them. Like, obviously, and that's probably the most prominent one, is the whole money doesn't have value, or like inherent value. And yeah, that has been a philosophy for a very long time. But I'm just saying, I've never been able to find an actual name for that. I've tried looking like to see if like I typed in like what the philosophy or the ideology would be into like a search engine to see if there was anyone who might have given this type of like stance a name. But as far as I could tell, it was just grouped in with things that were similar to it. But so that one I call financial unfulfillmentism. Which I guess the whole unfulfillmentism part could be applied to probably a bountiful of things, but anyway, next one would be, the next one I guess I mentioned would be inquisitism, which basically is, it related to my thoughts on how critical thinking, basically, and researching for yourself. Excuse me. Basically, it was the philosophy of always constantly inquiring into things and basically educating yourself and learning about different things. Now, that might sound similar to educationalism, which is the belief that education is important, or like an educational system or something is important, like the value of education, which in certain ways, yes, it is. And I, in regards, am an educationalist, which kind of sounds ironic considering I hate modern schooling, but I'm not against the idea of an educational system logically entirely. I think the least pointless, especially in North America, many parts of Europe, and also specifically also in southern parts of Africa, and maybe even to Eastern Africa as well, and also, well, Asia, to many places, and also Oceania is, I think post-secondary schooling, so college and university, is, I'd say the most beneficial and least pointless out of all the systems for most countries. Even like certain grading systems, though, are like, there's less, depending on what, some people go into post-secondary at 15 or 14 even, depending on the country or even region of the country. But I'm saying overall how it's done in many parts of the world, I believe the lecture-based system and more independence is much more beneficial than basically the pseudo encouragement of critical thinking that K through 12, and I'm using K through 12 scale because of just broad North American system, or like elementary preschool years to high school years, or older secondary education years. I think it actually, like, for the most part, discourages critical thinking, and maybe I'll get into that more in a completely different, at a different time in a different video. But and that's not saying that everything in modern schooling is terrible. I'm just saying I think it discourages. Its surface level encourages like critical thought. So anyway, so inquisitism, though, is basically the belief that you personally continuously try and educate yourself, or are always open to learning and constant research for yourself to understand something. Constant research, gaining knowledge or a perspective of someone else, or understanding of a different field of work or science, or just anything. You're open to exploring and understanding your knowledge further. And or just basically furthering your knowledge. So that's where I kind of make the differentiation between what I'm calling inquisitism and the philosophy of educationalism. And I guess also breaking up between scientism and things like that. But okay, so that's that one. And then the last one that at least I can remember off the top of my head right now is prolific consentful sensualism, which I've already discussed this a bit in length of like my beliefs on sex work. This has to relate to sex work and human sexuality and polyamory in many ways. Can't talk right now. In many ways, because I believe that human sexuality is very diverse, very broad, and this also relates to something I believed in. I talked about this even in the skit I made about human connectivity, or not human investment or emotional investment, not necessarily emotional connectivity. Like, I believe you can have emotional connectivity and should have emotional connectivity in a romantic relationship. I believe, though, you should have emotional investment for sexual interactions, say, between friends or friends with benefits, one may call it, and what would be called platonic intimacy. Because yes, it is an intimate, like, intimacy doesn't just have to come through romantic connections and things of the sort. And I think I should preface, because when I rewatched those videos, I also forgot to mention, I think, something that, for my beliefs towards sex work and what would be known as, in philosophical terms, as sex positivism, and also relating to sex positive feminism and sex positive masculinism, things of the sort, that you can. Well, something I forgot to mention with my beliefs towards sex work, which I think I'll mention here, is I would constantly say that not everyone in sex work has gone through a traumatic, sexually abusive scenario to end up basically internalizing their pain and going towards the sex work industry just to subconsciously gratify the very encroaching urge of feeling like they've had their sexuality ripped away from them, or feeling like they've had their very private and their very personal sense of sexual connectivity, of self-sexual connectivity, ripped away from them, which in that scenario can lead to, in psychology, what would be known as sex addiction or nymphomania, or nymphomaniacy, or I guess a more modern term would be hypersexuality. But what I'm saying is, I have the belief, and still logically do, that not everyone goes towards that field just because of sexual abuse. But something I also forgot to mention is that I don't believe that also people don't just go towards that field of work because of emotional abuse. Because there are those in the sex work industry, and also the general entertainment industry of acting, or the just artistic creation in general, or just any field of work. People go into certain fields of work because of emotional abuse or emotional manipulation or neglect. So, but with sex work, there can be, in psychological terms, people who internalize that and basically go looking for self-gratification and love and attention, like romantic love subconsciously, or like seeking validation or attention by going into that industry to make up for the lack or neglect of attention that they got maybe as a child or throughout their life, or feeling like they are loved in some way when they felt they didn't. And again, this is not all. I don't want to say all because it's very obviously not, or at least logically it's not. But there are people who do. Same with people who become in Hollywood and all the different film industries of the world, and video game acting, voice acting, it doesn't matter. There are those who go to it to seek validation, basically. And or there are those who subconsciously go towards it out of a maybe heavy traits or a full-blown independent personality disorder, and go towards it because they have control issues, and they basically are like, say if they have parents who are very controlling and very like helicopter parents or authoritarian parents, and they go towards it basically subconsciously out of rebellion towards them, to gratify their emotional state, to like feel like they're breaking free of their parents, even if they tell them that like, no, it's not because of my guardians or any of that, like, I don't need you, I'm not doing this for them. It basically, and I'm not saying that, oh, that wording got all mixed up. That was all just horrible what I just said. Terribly worded. Like they're trying to rebel against the people who were controlling them. Can be, is what I'm saying. I'm saying I don't feel that everyone as well goes into sex work because of that. Yes, there are obviously people who do, but not everyone does. There are those who go towards it because they actually want to give sexual entertainment and also help people discover their sexualities or sexual fetishes or kinks, if they have any, or also to help people with self-sexual connectivity, because that can actually help people as well with it. It's helped me in multitude of regards. And also for themselves, like I'm saying, just because they, well, let me be blatantly honest here. If someone is actually happy in sex work, like enjoying the work they do, whether it be pornography, prostitution, strip dancing, phone sex, if someone wants to go into that sort of field, doing it because they have some, again, self-centered qualities in that regard. They want to satisfy their own desires as well, for their self-interest for that career. Like, obviously, to have a healthy life in that career and that lifestyle, you have to have some enjoyment of sex, obviously, and sexual intimacy, and what I'm saying, investment and connectivity. Or if you're, say, like, if you're autosexual, which for those of you who don't know, that sexuality is basically you're sexually attracted to self-stimulation. You don't, which could say is like more of a narcissistic tendency, which it's not that people think that they're perfect. Like, oh, my body's perfect, so I don't need anyone else. It's just that autosexuals, basically, they're more sexually aroused by acts with their solo self. They're not at all or very much aroused by acts with someone else or other people. So there are those who go into pornography basically for just that. There are many probably, I'd assume, well, there definitely are quite a lot of cam models that probably, that was a conflicting word, definitely, probably. There are definitely cam models that do it because of their own, that they're autosexual. And actually, it's funny enough, I think a lot of people, there's some people I've heard about and also talked to, again, from my own research, I think there are a lot of people who confuse like autosexuality with asexuality, or being eros. But basically, no, autosexual is, again, attraction to your own self-stimulation, and asexuality is just you are not sexually aroused or attracted to anything. Basically, you don't feel or you don't enjoy sexual stimulation or you don't enjoy sex. Basically, you're not sexually aroused by things, or you, for the most part, do not find enjoyment with it. Or some people with neurological conditions as well just are not sexually aroused at all. It's not, they're just, they're literally incapable of feeling sexual arousal. So yeah, that I just feel people tend to get those two sexualities mixed up, asexual and autosexual. Um, but anyway, that was a little rant of that was a little sexology rant. But trying to keep the minimum to the rants. But anyway, felt like I should mention that. But that goes back to my whole thing of prolific and sinful sensualism, where you can have enjoyment and care, investment in what you are doing with someone sexually, whether it be romantic or platonic, and genuinely have it be beneficial for all groups involved. Can have investment and care for the person that you're engaging with. Or, like, if you're doing it by yourself in a solo act, say, in pornography, having care for the people who are watching it and helping them discover things for themselves and also have some relaxation and also, again, connectivity to their own sexualities through you. And thus bringing that to you as well, because you're living it out. It's like an exchange, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. If that made any sense. But okay, so those were mainly the ones that I had given names to. Then other ones of my philosophies include, that are already known, are things like idealism, or what I call relative idealism, like in a relative sense. That's not entirely, like, not factitiously idealistic, like it's not like over fantasization of something, like you're fantasizing like to a point where it becomes like basically where your idealism becomes unrealistic, which I also believe in realism, or what I call realistic optimism. So in many regards, I am an optimist, or I consider myself an optimist, which also related to, well, most of my beliefs also related to what I am, a nihilist of sorts as well, or again, what I would call an optimistic nihilist, or optimistic nihilism, which also led into another one being existential nihilism. But basically, if you don't know what nihilism is, it's basically the belief, mainly outlined by a German philosopher, and I think genealogist. He might have been a genealogist. I don't know if he was a genealogist, but he was a writer and a philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche. I think it's Nietzsche, or whatever. Friedrich Nietzsche. He proposed the idea of nihilism, basically saying that human morals and values and ideals, basically morality has no meaning in the grand scheme of things in the universe or anything like that. Like, it was at the time of very high religious implications in societies, which still exist heavily, but were very much more so heavy during Nietzsche's time in the 1800s. I forget when exactly, I think it might have been the 1880s or 1870s, but somewhere around like the 1870s, 1880s era. And basically, he proposed the idea that which was very prominent in the spiritual belief of atheism and anti-atheism, is there is no God, and in his view, which I disagree, is no afterlife as well, basically. And because of that, like humans being biologically formed and not having any sort of predestined, goal, basically, there's no predestined goal for humanity or things, and he believes basically nihilism states of morality being inherently pointless, being meaningless in the grand scope of the universe. And our existence is pretty well just nothing. Like, we mean nothing in the grand larger scheme of things, which I absolutely still agree with, but basically he created, and well, that led into like his whole, I believe it was coined as being like Nietzsche's cure for nihilism, and like how he proposed to combat that and still not just say fuck it to life and off yourself in that regard. What he came up with to try and combat that. He didn't exactly, I mean, he could, I guess he was somewhat of an optimistic nihilist. Like, but he was also an indeterminist. That's another belief of mine, is indeterminism, basically believing that nothing is predestined or predetermined. And the opposite of that is determinism, where you do believe that there is such thing as destiny and fate. But basically, Nietzsche, my belief was held of, oh God, sorry. Wondering why I'm belching so much, because I've just ate a slice of pumpkin pie that was delicious, but sadly, definitely artificial, because it was from the Big W. Like you can taste just the sugar and artificial sweetener and lies in the fucking pie. But pumpkin pie, by the way, here's a little short rant. I know I said one rant, but all you degenerates out there, pumpkin pie is the best pie. There's no argument. There is no disagreement with that. That is just absolute, undeniable, factual truth that pumpkin pie is the superior pie. I don't care what part of the world you're from, what other ethnic pie creations or pastries you have. I don't care. Pumpkin pie, number one. Sweet potato pie can suck my ass. You just, no. And for those of you who say that fucking you don't like pumpkin pie, but you like mashed sweet potatoes, you can go jump off a cliff, because they taste the goddamn same. Sorry, that was just my rant about how pumpkin pie is the definitive superior pie. It is, there is no question about it. I actually would love, I don't know why though they don't, I don't know why does nobody make like a layer of crust over top of the pumpkin mush, like the pumpkin filling? Like on pumpkin pies, why is it always just open air pumpkin? Just mashed pumpkin base. Why is there never like a layer of upper crust on the pie? I'd love to see a pumpkin pie that's like a blueberry, like a traditionally westernized North American blueberry pie, or even like a rhubarb pie or something. And also, pumpkin pie is technically the healthiest pie for you. Well, actually, okay, maybe it is tied with at least the pies that, at least in terms of traditional North American pies and European pies to an extent. And also, well, technically, well, Central America does have, well, their own variations of certain things, but, of those pies, but, and Australia, but pumpkin pie is technically, if you made like totally like solid rhubarb pie, and I don't know if you guys know what rhubarb is, I just found this out recently, because I didn't know what rhubarb was. It's the stocky part of, I forget what vegetable, it actually might be most vegetables, but I think it's celery? I don't know, it's like the stocky bottom part of the celery, that is, it has a lot of antioxidants and just a whole bountiful of vitamins, minerals, and vitamins in it, yes, and compounds that are generally incredible and incredibly healthy for the body. So if you just made like an entirely, not strawberry rhubarb pie, just like a full-on rhubarb pie, I think that probably would be that might be just tied with pumpkin for healthiest pie. But for the context of my argument here, we're saying no, pumpkin pie is absolutely the healthiest pie you could eat. Just along with most fruit pies. Anyway, well, out of all the fruit pies, it's the healthiest and it's the best. Shut up. Go to hell. Yeah, anyway, back on the topic of this video. I was about to say pumpkin pie again. I was literally about to go, like, back on the topic. Pumpkin pie. No, okay. back on the topic. Oh yeah, humans are meaningless. That was the topic. At least in my opinion, based on nihilism, human life is meaningless. Optimistic nihilism is basically the stance that even though we are meaningless, we can still make benefit out of our meaninglessness, out of there being no inherent worth to our existence. Basically, this bleeds in as well to my whole thing on self-maintaining altruism, where I believed in all these things like communism. Oh my god. Communism or communistic beliefs and democratic libertarian values, basically because I knew, or I felt that life was pointless, so there was no point in just solely gratifying yourself, hurting others for no reason. I think many could agree with me on that, but then that got into the issue of, well, basically that's my sense for optimistic nihilism. That got into the issue, though, of like, how do you justify that, though? Because something I found one argument that I really got into one of my friends who is very much capitalist, and I talked about them in my suicidal ideation video, how basically, ironically, despite us having very different political views and philosophies, they helped me very much through my suicidality. Like when I was very, very heavily contemplating flying to another country and killing myself. Which, by the way, in case any of you are worried, that is not why I'm explaining why I'm on this journey that I've gone on. That is not in my head right now. I'm not doing that. I haven't been suicidal for months now. Ever since I was on sertraline, the antidepressant that my psychiatrist put me on, it helped me. Obviously not. It didn't help me find worth in life, which I don't think anything. When it comes to all sorts of things, even for relaxation, like porn, video games, entertainment, you shouldn't. Well, you could. It can help cope. And I guess I used to say that you shouldn't need something, you should want something, which is still technically true, but I think it should be, I guess it's a better stance to say that you shouldn't depend on something, whether that's psychological counseling to get you through each day, or I guess, say in the case I brought up in my skit of like transgenderism, or like if you're transitioning to another gender, whatever it may be, or if you're identifying as another, like in terms of gender expression and persona, because there is a difference, like as gender fluid or non-binary or whatever it may be, or intersex. Is that every 30 minutes? Every at 33 exactly does that damn message. I don't know why. Basically, bottom line being, you should want it, and it can help you, but you shouldn't depend on it to give your life full meaning, or like you shouldn't depend on those things like entertainment and things like that to solely give your life value in others' eyes or your eyes. But, or at least I thought so, in my opinion it was. But obviously, logically, it's your choice. But I'm just saying, from my perspective, anyway, so, again, okay, back to topic. It's not like I depend, I'm actually off those drugs now because my psychiatrist recommended that I actually don't continue them, because it doesn't seem like, now that I'm no longer having suicidal ideation, my somatic symptom disorder has at points remitted, and it's not near as severe as it was in the city of Toronto, that I don't need them anymore for as a short period as I was on them. It literally just got me to a state where I could better discern my thinking. Well, obviously, I'm still very depressed, heavily. I suffer from depression, and I'm still morally conflicted, as I'm explaining to you now, about everything. But it helped me get to a point where it's not like just kill yourself and that will be the only solution. I don't know if I'll find that to be the only solution one day. I don't know, but well, there's a morbid thought for you. But basically, I have them with me just in like hold on. I also have another prescription that was for when I was suffering from chronic nausea for a year that really helped me, called chlorprozine, right there. And then I still have about like maybe 2 weeks worth of sertraline in there. I haven't taken them for I haven't taken this probably in like so chlorprozine is an antiemetic, helps with nausea by distorting signals in the medulla oblongata and the vagus nerve, and I'm not going to go fully into neuroscience right now, but that's what that does. It could also work as an antipsychotic, but that's not what I was taking it for. And this is obviously a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, but I haven't taken it in. So I haven't taken that one in probably actually now almost a year. Wow, that really puts me in perspective of how much time has really passed. I probably haven't taken that one since I made the first skit I ever did, literally the Just One of Those Days video where I was up on my old house's roof. Actually, in funny enough sense, talking about nihilism and existentialism. Well, and I guess in a sense, cosmicism, which is more of that's more of a fiction genre than a philosophy. I know many people regard because H.P. Lovecraft, the writer, one of my favorite authors, minus the whole very much xenophobia and all that. A lot of people say he coined that philosophy, he created that philosophy of cosmicism. It's really more of a genre of horror, I'd say, than an actual philosophy. I mean, unless you did believe that there was ancient forces that really are out there somewhere in the universe and world that could crush humanity like the blink of an eye and eldritch horrors and all that. If you believe that, then yes, I guess cosmicism could be a philosophy for you, but whatever. But no, it's actually things have, I guess, kind of come full circle in that sense, at least right now. But anyway, basically, I haven't taken this in months, but I keep it with me, and same with that one in case I need to again. So yeah, that it's fine. I don't know why I did that. But okay, so point being, most of my beliefs came from as well the fact, not just again with logic and reasoning used to determine the whole nihilistic sense of life. I felt that there was no point in being solely self-centered. But where the dilemma came in with that is when my more like wait, is it? Oh God, I can't tell what that. No, it's still going. 40 minutes and 5 seconds. For a second, I thought it stopped. I talked about this friend of mine I had in the suicidal ideation video, where we oppose very heavily on certain things to do with politics and like human behavior and nature. And he, from a psychological standpoint and prognosis, well, not even prognosis, just diagnosis, he has hefty traits of, I said, sociopathy or sociopath or psychopath. And basically his stance was just, why shouldn't, in my life, I want to get the most out of my life before I'm dead. I couldn't really care about people I don't know. And I just want to make as much money as possible and live as comfortably as I can to bring me happiness in my life and strive in my own individual way and work. That's what he felt. And I was on the opposite end because he thought life was pointless. And then I was on the opposite end of that because I thought life was pointless. And I thought, okay, the only way that this argument is really going to, my side of this argument is going to have an end point to it, like where I can concretely say that there's something that can debunk his point, would be I thought of this, I did this thought experiment with myself. I did it actually for a while, and then I gave it a name, which I called the egotistic sociopathic dilemma. Basically, why I think it'd be better to live in a more self-maintaining altruistic way in everything you do in life, and as well as things relating to libertarianism and libertarian communism and things like that, and redistribution of your wealth, or wealth just on a societal level, would be because, let's say you have someone who is psychopathic, who doesn't have empathy for other people, not much compassion, very least very little amount, maybe only for the people around them, or they might just be like idolizing the thought of those people being around them and not really actually caring for them, which can happen with sociopathy. But basically, you have someone who's sociopathic and also possibly has egotistical personality disorder, or is just has heavy leaning egotistical traits, or with egotistical personality disorder, otherwise known as egocentrism. Basically, they live their lives trying to get ahead of others, only caring about themselves, especially in finances and business and that sort of regard, and basically just caring about getting higher and higher up the social ladder in, say, a capitalist world, and climbing the scale of hierarchy, basically. Well, but because of someone else because of, say, monopolization by people who also think alike like them, who are sociopathic and egocentric, who are only out for their own self-gratification in finance and business, basically, those people, or that person who is egotistic and sociopathic, now can no longer climb up the scale of social hierarchy in just a society, in any capitalist-centered society, in that ladder. They can't climb up it, or in a ladder extent, a fascist society, if you're going for that regard of stuff based upon class, dividing classes, and or just classism, and also hierarchy of ethnicity, which is also logically, I feel, horrible, and it's not scientifically fair at all. But, or just anyway, in the sense that they are now perpetually stuck in an endless loop of trying to climb up that ladder, and are never able to, because the system in place does not allow for them to gain any sort of traction. Maybe someone else similar to them could, but then that other person who is just like that one, that That person who is sociopathic and egotistical can't. Like, they cannot climb up that ladder. And now that person is in a miserable state of constant depression and constantly in a pitfall of just misery. They're probably even more angry. They probably even now gain less empathy towards people because of the situation they put in. Maybe they develop an aggressive tendency or anger issues or like aggressive behavioral disorder. It sends their life into absolute chaos. So, and my stance would be that things like libertarian communism, a system of that if that system worked well enough, that, or at least in some beneficial means, you'd be able to live your life and have your own independent self-gratification, even if you are a sociopath, which I'm not defending sociopathy as like it's a serious psychiatric disorder, or at least logically I feel it's a disorder and not human nature, but you would be able to operate for your own self-gratification. Other than the gaining more wealth and money in a, like if a set currency was set up, you wouldn't be able to gain more in terms of income. But hey, if you work more hours than someone, yes, you're going to gain more. You're going to have more wealth at some point than someone else. Like, I think a lot of, God damn, excuse me, I think a lot of people misinterpret, because for a while I was actually misinterpreting this when I first started learning about the Communist Manifesto and things like that, and Marxism and all this, the other forms of communism, and I guess to a larger extent, anarchy and anarcho-communism, which, by the way, I'm going to state right now, libertarian communism and anarcho-communism are not the same thing. They're similar, but they're not the same. Basically, a lot of people misinterpret communism as being like, yes, it's equalized income wealth based on income, but that's not going to guarantee like total equalization of wealth in terms of like how much you actually save up, basically, just what you hold on to in terms of your own wealth. Like, if someone, say, in a system worked more hours a job than someone, or did more labor than someone else, and they are paid for that, well, then they are going to gain more than someone else. Maybe just not based on income, it might be equalized. Like, say if let's use an example. If I had, okay, actually, you know what? These pillows, let's use these pillows. We live in a communist, or I'm hiring them for a job, and I'm paying them in more communistic redistribution of wealth. This pillow is working 5 days a week for 6 hours each day. And this pillow is working 2 days a week, and they're working 12 hours each day. So they may be getting paid, and I'm paying them, let's say $30 an hour. Dream come true if most jobs did that in not just the Western world, all over the world. But $30 an hour. So, oh God, I'm terrible at math, but I should have picked 12 hours for that. Okay, let's make it a bit even. 2 days and 2 hours, this pillow is working 5 days and 6 hours. So this pillow, even though they're being paid the same amount, $30 an hour, this pillow is still going to, at the end of the day, even though their income wealth is the same, is going to have more of a savings than this pillow. It's still going to be equalized and can eliminate the chance of, well, technically you could potentially eliminate the chance of monopoly, but anyway, this one is going to come out with more wealth in the end. It's still going to be equalized, but my point being, get back there. My point being, my ideal for that is with the whole egotistic sociopathic dilemma thought process, that in a society that would function more libertarian-like, and communistically, you could still have your own self-worth and gain whatever you want, fame, climbing up a social hierarchy in terms of like popularity, someone's views towards you, only buying things for yourself, and still operating in a system that is equalized in terms of wealth. Yeah, you won't be gaining more and more and more money for that, but you still will be able to buy the things you want. And it's no one saying in that society that you have to be social with someone, you have to care about other people. It's just you operate in that system, if that makes sense. Maybe I'm not explaining it terribly well, but also is why I don't believe in, again, fucking just extortion of land. Like, just extorting land for your own wealth, basically. Just, or privatization, I should say, of land. But anyway, that was that thought experiment that I created, which logically I still wholeheartedly believe that. But, oh, I shouldn't say wholeheartedly and then logically, because that's now it's, okay. Bottom line is, oh, and also, well, other philosophies of mine would include relative stoicism. I'm not a stoic in many regards, that's why I say relative. Relative pacifism, and also technically pacifism, because I don't like war. I don't like resolving things with violence. If it can be avoided, which relates to mercifalitism. But relative pacifism, basically trying to go the pacifistic route, non-violence. And then Epicureanism basically pleasure in moderation. It's like, I guess technically you can consider it's not it's kind of, that's an oversimplification. I was going to say it's like a dumbed down version of hedonism, but a severely dumbed down version of hedonism. It's nothing like that. It's basically, it's just pleasure in moderation is the whole Epicurean stance. And then I also believe in Hopman's theory of empathy, but it also goes into more of philopsychology. And for those of you who don't know what the term philopsychology means, it's basically a newer term, basically the study and analysis of how our psychological state affects our philosophical and moral values in life, like how our cognitive and emotional state affects what we believe, basically, our beliefs and values. That's what philopsychology means. But but now I'm going to explain, so what is the problem then? Why am I in this major existential dread and conflict with my morality? Because so many things started becoming too contradicting, I guess I'll say. And now I believe logically that with the whole thing about us not being perfect, people can be hypocrites in small forms. I've been a hypocrite at points in the smallest forms of things I didn't mean to say to someone, if I was in anger or something along those lines, if I was getting very emotional and heated towards someone and I said something that I shouldn't have said, or even when I, like with my regrets of the past, like things I did hypocritical is when I talked about in videos before that I've had regrets. I've been a manipulative person in the past. Before, especially I said when I was leaving Toronto about to my first ex-partner, who was friends with me for a while, and I was just a toxic person to them, and at their partner at the time as well, and I was encroaching, and I just, analyzing my psychology, I think it was because out of some form of, well, it was out of histrionic tendency, because I wanted to impress them. I didn't want to I guess more so the why those came on was because I didn't want to lose them. I guess I'll say. I didn't want to. I'm trying to think right now. I didn't want to. Why I acted the way I did. I didn't want to lose them, basically. And I just was thinking of only myself, and I was being completely selfish, which went against, at the time, what were the core principles of my philosophies, which are the ones I still hold today, because it just, obviously, again, they've changed more, but the core premise of them are still the same. But I was a hypocrite, basically. I was being a hypocrite, and I was being toxic to them. And it might have also had something to do with the fact that with what pertained to all of our friendship, I might have been, because of the time, it probably had to do with the fact that I was a closeted, like, polyamorous person, or I guess even to a latter extent, closeted sexually promiscuous or promiscuous person. And hell, it might have even had to do with the fact that, well, I don't want to say closeted because I didn't know at the time. Closeted really more so means that you know and you're not open about it, like socially. Like you're not very vocal about, like, say, usually they use the term closeted for sexuality or romantic types. I didn't know that I had feelings about gynasexuality, because I later found out that I'm gynosexual, or I identify mainly with gynasexual, the sexual attraction to femininity, but again, not specifically to the female gender. So it probably had something to do with that as well, even though at the time I was questioning whether I was omnisexual or not. But anyway, just that would be a hypocritical stance that I had then. I was being an idiot. And I changed myself for that, and I apologized to them profusely multiple times, not out of some attempt to regain the friendship, because I didn't want to, and I didn't think that actually was, well, I didn't think it was best to. Even when I last tried speaking to them, not even tried, just wrote them an apology. I said, you can talk to me if you want, and if not, then that's perfectly understandable. And it's not me looking to be friends or anything. It's just, if you ever want to talk or not, it's whatever, basically. And that's where it left. Never spoke to them again. And, I just remembered something else that thought that's where it left. But then I also, when I was leaving the city, because I was in a very emotional fit, I called them out of pure, I guess, irrationality, and just told them my situation, and again just apologized, and then I just said goodbye, and that was the last that I ever tried to involve myself with their affairs. At least if my memory is serving me correctly, because of the blurred memory issues and recall problems. But bottom line being, that would have been a hypocritical stance. But there were so many things, and I'm not going to go through all of them, because really, even by this point, I can't fully, while I'm speaking right now, I can't recall absolutely every single one. I know the major ones that happened, but I'm sure there were plenty more, and there have been plenty of them throughout my entire time, even here while staying at my relative's cottage. So much of what I held logically became beyond contradicting, to a point where I couldn't just keep going on the way I was. Basically, like, it's funny, one of my favorite YouTubers, God, I can never remember his name fully. He has two channels, both of the same name, because he lost the access to the account of one of them years ago, and he opened another one of the same name. XX Hat Guy XX, I think. He's the teenager from years ago who explained Einstein's theory of relativity and like of fourth dimensions. His original channel. I think it was around my age right now when he made that. What was that now, like 8 years ago or so? But he had one which I really resonated with, especially now, that I think is a really underrated video by him called The Paradox of Social Idealism. And it's basically, he's talking about what I'm talking about, how I'm feeling now, is basically he's saying, in his view at least, is that social ideology and idealism is in some form or another inherently contradicting. Which in many regards, yes, I did believe, again, it relates to how I didn't feel anything could be perfect. I do believe that, yeah, we will contradict ourselves in some way, but all of it just got, there were so many things that made everything come to question for me where it just got too much. It seemed like even now as well, as I'm talking, everything is too contradicting. I don't even know if I should be, like, morally, ethically, if it's all right for me to upload this video to YouTube, to talk about this, to make content, to believe in bettering causes and being involved in activism or advocacy in some way, or trying to hold philosophies that are more beneficial. I don't know, because, okay, so one thing is, I'll just say, it's too many to list, but things became too contradicting, and it terrified me. Things became so unbelievably contradicting. Things to do with my household, people in my household, made it a million times worse. And as well as close friends of mine and people I really trusted started seemingly betraying their own ideals or what they had said before, or what stuff that I thought they had heavily valued. And it didn't seem like they changed, they weren't even claiming that they changed their opinions on it. It just seemed like pure hypocrisy. And I think people who, if they're watching this, know who they are, like who I'm alluding to with this. And it's not just one person, it's multiple. And then it just got to everyone around me. Every person I saw, everyone in the society around me, the city, just everything, everywhere. And it is killing me internally. And I couldn't handle that anymore. It's, again, everything that I said, like I just screamed out at the end of when I tell people I want to be a pornographer and they wait, no video. Everything I said at that end little monologue that I did, sorry, I meant it like art, all of artistic, creative creation, entertainment. What if its consequences, we say we can't be held responsible for trying to actually make something beneficial, then how can we claim we want to help? What if my art is doing the exact opposite of what I want it to do on a major scale, and it's just subtle, and I don't know it. And as well as with that, the whole contradictions thing led into another bit of my... Hold on, I'm gonna... Yeah, we're over an hour again. With the whole contradictions thing, it led into the other question of existentialism and morality and sociology, is that with all these contradictions, if they are really there, how can anything really get better? If I'm more of an optimist and I hold an optimistic view of things and believing that people and the world around me can change for a beneficial means or for the good, what I feel is the good, at least, or others in my boat feel is beneficial, how and so many... What is this? Okay, that said it again. I don't know why it keeps flashing that message. It's still recording, so just how if there's really this deep of contradictions are so embedded into the world and human nature, or how human nature has formed to be, if it has formed to be that way, how can anything really truly change on a grand scale? Like, I remember I was talking on my way coming back here after I opened up to a coworker of mine who helped me get necessities recently. Yesterday, going into Peterborough to get some things, opened up to them about all this. How they tried telling me that, look at all the progress we've made in history, things like that. Like with technology and medical benefits and all that, and societally, have we really made that much progress? Have we really? Or is it really, or has sociological issues just taken on a more subtle form? We talk about, say, here's an example, systemic racism that is very much embedded in much of Western culture, and also embedded in many other Eastern cultures as well, towards foreigners too, because of colonialism and just basically because of imperialism and colonialism and the whole destruction of cultures around the world. Well, let's use that as an example. I talked about this when I was in Peterborough, sitting by the restaurant in the early morning, and my views of how systemic racism has very much been influenced into a lot of society, especially in Canadian society and in American society. But we talk about how, life is better than it was for many ethnic groups that weren't Caucasian or Christian, people who weren't white, basically, or people who weren't straight or heterosexual since the 1960s, or it's progressed since the 1990s. Has it really, or has it just taken on a slightly subtle form? Or has it gotten only slightly better? Like, mass homophobia and racial prejudice still exists. And I always believe, yes, you should have your entitlement to your own opinion as long as you're not hurting anyone else and you can coincide peacefully. But even that, I don't know if... Is it really possible for us to coincide peacefully? How can anything really change if everyone has such varying views on things? How can anyone really coexist peacefully? How can it not contribute? How can someone's opposite viewpoint not in some way contribute to alienation of some kind? Like cultural alienation or just social alienation in general and discrimination. How... I'm not just talking with like rightist views or right-wing views. I'm talking even like with left-wing views, leftist views. It's... and centrist views. How does it not... how is it really not causing more alienation? Like, say, I love offensive jokes is one thing. I love dark humor. I believe in what it would... Albert Camus, I believe his name was, he proposed the philosophy of absurdism, which is another philosophy I held in terms of comedy and entertainment. Is absurdism, is laughing at the darkness to give it less power, basically laughing at the absurd nature of our existence, or the absurdity of how something shouldn't be behaving this way, but it is, and it's... our reaction is to laugh at it. But is that not... like, we say laugh at the people who cause us pain because we need some sort of comic levity too, but is that potentially not making their condition worse? Making fun of them? Like, I believe in psychological care as well, but I also believe in comedic levity for those people, and laughing at yourself, laughing at your own ego and your own sense of self when you fuck something up or you've clearly made a fool out of yourself. I've done that on multiple occasions, and it's just like having self-awareness of things too. It just... okay, there's that. That's another reason I'm up here and going to Ottawa, is because of that. And okay, and the other major one would be, are people just inherently sociopathic and empathyless? We say it, and I believed in it from scientific reasoning in psychology, that humans are inherently social beings. Even people on a more introverted... well, introversion is on the scale of antisocial personality disorder, with, again, as I've said before, manic psychopathy being on the farthest end of that. Like serial killers and murderers and things like that. But, which is, most sociopaths are not murderers. I'm just going to say that right now. But the frick is that noise? Okay, I don't know if you guys can hear that. 2 times in these recordings that I've heard noise. Once it was somebody screaming, and now that sounds like... is that a woodpecker? That might be a woodpecker somewhere. It's literally going... sounds like a beak tapping on wood, I guess. But let me check that again. Hour and 13. Are people just... logically speaking, we know in psychology that sociopathy is a disorder. Disorder means disorganization of, well, something in chaos, disarray. Basically a disorder of the emotional state. Our emotions are not supposed to function in that way. That doesn't mean everyone is the same, but because we all have tendencies of sociopathy as well, but having it being an overarching, with personality disorders specifically, it's basically, and behavioral disorders, is... it's called a disorder when it becomes the overarching trait, basically. It encompasses everything else to a problematic extent in your emotional state. And at least that's what I thought. But now it starts to seem like, are we all really just subconsciously, inherently self-centered and empathyless? Do we from a young age, are we just inherently born with those traits as our nervous systems develop and our cerebrums? Or are we so fragile that from a young age, if we learn something, can we not go back from it and not really ever change internally? Like, can we... And if that's the case, do people just put on a persona and do they just personify an empathic and compassionate personality just to get what they want in a more dark empath stance, which is, logically speaking, a very rare trait for sociopaths to have, is dark empathy. But maybe we're all just dark empaths. I know that sounds more like a misanthropist or a misanthropic type stance in it. And if you don't know what misanthropy is, it's the philosophy that humans by nature are destructive or evil, I guess you would call. Like, are we just only in it for ourselves? Okay, basic outline of what I'm feeling. Can anything change really on a major scale? Just that possibility. I don't care whether it happened. Well, yes, I would love it if it happens, but I want to know if that possibility is even true, if it's even a possibility at all for things to majorly change. Are we just inherently sociopathic or not? And there's a chance to change. Can people really change their behavior and themselves, like how they feel towards something? And with all that being said, is art really doing anything to help combat that? Or is art really just talking and distracting us from all of it? And is there, because of the meaninglessness of life, or what I feel is that life is meaning and existence is meaningless, is there really a point to just keep going through the same monotonous bullshit day in and day out? Like I mentioned in that skit, that someone did tell me, and I meant that, someone did tell me that the meaning of life, or at least they feel, is to find meaning in it, make meaning of it. But logically, I now say, how is that even like a realistic meaning? How does that give meaning to anything? Just searching for something nonstop for the rest of your life to keep yourself going, keep fighting. How is that a point? How does that make it even worthwhile? How does it? I knew that people before had to have some sort of meaning to them, but is that really just another distraction from the inevitability of nothingness? And is art more detrimental than the good that it can make? Uh, yeah, that outlined, I think, a better stance of what's been going on. Looks like my phone battery is dying, so I'm going to have to charge my phone. I will upload these 2 videos first and then shoot the last one because I just remembered I need to talk about so I'm gonna have to, there's a clip of me riding Timmy, my motorized bike, for the last time before I had to give him away. And I talk about how I was gonna mention a very scary experience that I had a few months back. The scariest experience that I've had in my entire life so far. Besides the kidnapping. But it involves me riding in the dark on my motorized bike back to here, and me breaking down in the middle of nowhere at night. And I thought something was chasing me. So yeah, and with that, I will talk about my fears and insecurities as well. So I think that'd be healthy. All right, yeah, so I'll do that.